what it takes to be successful as an author requires two things. One, you got to be a really good writer because there's a lot of books out there that we're competing with, and the writing has just got to be spot on and solid. But because it is fast and it's cheap and it's easy to publish a book, that's created a problem. And the problem is that there are about 4 million new titles published every year. Okay. So it's up to us as authors to figure out how we're going to cut through the noise.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody. So pretend that you just finished writing your book. You're sitting across from a marketing expert and he tells you that you need $25,000 to make it successful. That's what happened to one author who met today's guest, and it sparked a complete reinvention of book marketing. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about writing books, sure, but also about the strategies that make them unstoppable. Our guest has cracked the code on book launches, turning his Fortune 10 experience into a system that eliminates the guesswork. So meet Bryan Heathman, the man who's making bestsellers predictable with his new book, the #1 bestseller, Book Marketing Reinvented. So without further ado, Bryan, welcome to the show.
Danielle, thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. This is going to be a fun one because I think all authors miss this huge part of book writing. They think their experience just ends when they're completed the book and they get it on the shelf, but marketing is a huge aspect that is often overlooked. And here you are kind of, shining a light and offering that some tips and guidance for this. So amazing stuff. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because, as an author, when you're writing your book and you get to the end and you write the end and you set your pen down and you say, okay, I'm done. I'm finally done. What I like to tell authors that choose to be successful as authors is that 5% of the work is done and 95% of the work is ahead of you. Why would I ever say that? I mean, because, writing a book is a big deal, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you come up with a great idea and then you spend anywhere from 3 to 12 months writing it and researching and coming up with all the things that you're going to say. And then you actually find the discipline to, have a 3-hour writing block twice a week to sit down and do your writing and march through it. You finally get done. And that's the conundrum that we're in today as authors, is that what it takes to be successful as an author requires two things. One, you got to be a really good writer because there's a lot of books out there that we're competing with, and the writing has just got to be spot on and solid. But because it is fast and it's cheap and it's easy to publish a book, that's created a problem. And the problem is that there are about 4 million new titles published every year. Okay. So it's up to us as authors to figure out how we're going to cut through the noise. Now, does the publisher play a role in that? Of course. But from doing this hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times for several decades, I've come to the philosophy that half the success of a book rests on the publisher, and half the success of the book rests on the author. So why would I even say that? Well, there's many things that a publisher can't even do. I mean, could I get on a podcast show and talk about your book, Danielle? No, I mean, it would be
It wouldn't
impossible.
quite be the same experience at all.
Yeah, yeah. Could I sit and or could I do a television interview? Can I write articles about what you're doing? Um, can I entertain your social media audience with funny anecdotes about your characters? No, I mean these are things that the author kind of has to do, and it's even hard to delegate. Okay,
Mm.
so yeah, so half of our job as writers is to write really good. Half of our job is to get the word out there. And now more than ever, there's just so many things that we're not supposed to do, but there's so many things that you have to do in order to get the word out and cut through all those 4 million other titles that are on the heels of your book launch.
Right. So there's a lot to keep in mind then, which a lot of authors just don't think about. But I do like what you said about how it kind of is a 50-50 job. Well, that was the percentage, right? It was mainly author's job, a little bit publisher's job, but it's something that they don't account for a lot. So I'm glad that you have this book out there that kind of offers those strategies and gives us something to think about beyond the book writing phase, which I think is actually very well reflected in the opening of your book, the Achilles heel of authors, which was actually the story that I mentioned in the introduction a little bit. I'm wondering if you want to tell the audience a little bit about that $25,000 marketing campaign and what we can learn from that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. So, my philosophies on book marketing go way back. So,
Mm.
when I was in my early career, I worked for 3 Fortune 10 companies in their marketing departments. So I got visibility in doing lots of really big national and international product launches when I was in doing that work. But I remember one day specifically, I was leaning up against the water cooler in the corporate headquarters of this one very large company. And I was complaining that the company only gave me a $2 million ad budget to launch the product. Now, my job was to get this product aware for people that lived in Portland, Maine, all the way across the country to Portland, Oregon. So hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cities.
Mm.
So how could I possibly purchase enough television impressions, enough radio impressions, enough magazine ads to reach all these people and launch this product effectively with $2 million. Now, I was, of course, competing with other large marketing companies. So Coca-Cola, they were launching a new product and they had an $80 million ad budget. Lexus was releasing a new car and they had a $50 million ad budget. And so that's what's going through my mind as I'm leaning up against the water cooler, complaining about a $2 million ad budget. Okay. So
Mhm.
today, let's think about it in terms of an author. Okay.
Right.
So you're an author, you've got a widget or a product, just like I did as a product manager with a $2 million ad budget. And just like the Coke product manager who had the $80 million ad budget. And we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get people that live between Portland, Oregon and Portland, Maine to understand that this product is on the market. Okay. So if you look at it from that perspective, and let's just say you're an author and you don't have $2 million to launch your book. So let's take off 10 and say that we've got a $200,000 launch budget to launch our book. Well, most authors, that's not realistic either. So take off another 0 and you've got $20,000 to launch your ad budget. And this gets back to your question, Danielle. So if you have a $25,000 launch budget, how can you use that to make people aware that your book is on the market in, let's say today, in 650 different Barnes and Noble stores?
Right.
All right.
What
So
do you do? It's a
it's
tricky
like
one.
it's a really hard thing to do. So we as authors, we've got to get really smart. You've got limited budget. You probably have a limited team. You probably don't have an advertising agency for that kind of budget. And so a lot of it is on you. So what are you going to do with that budget? Well, there's a whole host of things that you can do to reach readers where they are. Now, today in North America, and it's different for other countries, but today in North America, only 16% of people that live in North America read books. And you're
That's
like,
a
what? 16%? I thought everybody read books. No, it's a very narrow thing. So that makes our job easy. Let's just say there's what, 400 million people that live in North America, plus or minus, and 16% of that, it narrows it down. So we're really not talking to everybody. We're just talking to a subset. Now, if we're talking to readers, we know that people are buying books on how to make sourdough bread. They're buying books on travel to Croatia, and they're buying books on things that they need to understand about their equestrian hobby. Those are just three hypothetical examples. So if I launched a book on marketing, do I want to talk to people who are making sourdough bread? No. Do I want to talk about people who are traveling to Croatia? No. Do I want to talk to people who are equestrian enthusiasts? No. I've got to find out how to take my budget and just talk to authors. And then I've got to do the next challenge of reinforcing that message a couple times. So Danielle, if you had to guess, how many times does it take when you hear an ad before it actually sinks in?
I feel like there's probably been studies about this. I'm going to say maybe 3 as
So
a ballpark guess.
yeah, no, it's a great ballpark guess. When I wrote my first book called Conversion Marketing, the number was 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah. And that number is probably a little bit higher today because the noise is louder in today's. So somehow we've got to figure out how we're going to reinforce that message to a very, very narrow audience. So the trick that I use is finding what I call audience clusters. So where can I find clusters of people that have the aptitude to read my book? So I look at civic organizations, I look at magazine readers, I look at podcasters, I look at bloggers, people who are in the business of having audiences of these very narrow interests. And that's where I usually start my work to try to figure out how a measly $25,000 ad budget is actually going to move the needle. Now,
Right.
I know that a lot of people out there who've just written their book or are listening or are thinking about doing a book marketing campaign, they don't have anywhere close to $25,000 to launch their book. I know that for a fact. So really, the job gets down to a couple things. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we'll get there in a few minutes.
Of course. So I guess what's trying to come down to then is what you have to make sure you're doing is targeting to the very specific people that you're looking for. But I kind of have a counter argument for you then, because I've heard it a little bit of both ways. Some people say to target to a very specific niche, and then other people say, make it evergreen, make it something that everybody can relate to. What do you say to those people who challenge that kind of theory?
Yeah, I'm not a believer in big, broad marketing that goes out to everybody. I'm looking at what my cost per impression is. So I think about this kind of like a VP of marketing. And I've got a very limited amount of time and a limited amount of budget and a limited number of impressions that goes out. So if I am putting an impression out for my book and it reaches the equestrian enthusiast, that ad bounced off their forehead.
Okay.
Same with the sourdough
Right,
bread.
because it's just not going to land.
It's not going to land. And there's too little time and there's too little budget to spread it out to make it work for everybody. Now, but this is also true. When people are writing books, you'll invariably ask them, so who should read your book? And what do you think their answer always is?
Oh man, well, that's a hard one because it wouldn't relate to the specific topic itself. Or would they say everybody? Is that also
They,
what
al-
we're getting at?
they always say everybody should read my book. So if you're
Everybody
writing
should
a
read the book.
memoir or an autobiography, or something along those lines, or maybe it's even a self-help book, the author will say, well, everybody should have this information.
Mhm.
But the reality is, when somebody walks into a Barnes and Noble store, for instance, and there's 650 of them here in the United States, plus or minus, um, stores have different size footprints, but the typical store will have about 50,000 to 75,000 individual titles in the store. Okay, so you walk in the store, you see the New York Times bestseller table, you see the hot new releases, and then the store is organized by genre. So you'll walk by magazines, you'll walk by children's books, you'll walk by medical journals, you'll walk by religion. And if you're the typical consumer, and a Barnes and Noble store, let's say, has 200 of those categories, you don't have time to go to 200 categories, and you're probably not interested in doing that. So you're going to walk straight to the category of the manga book that you walked in there to buy, or the graphic novel, or the whatever it is. So we have to think really specifically about who's going to read the book, and we've got to think really specifically about how to reach them. Because I would argue that the person walking in to buy a graphic novel,
They're gonna go to the graphic novel section.
yeah,
Right.
and are they going to go to the philosophy section, or the self-help section, or the leadership section, or the sales books section? No, they're probably not. They're probably going to walk straight to that area, and they're probably not going to have interest in those other 200 categories.
Right. Yeah,
So
so that's kind of what you have to consider. And you just framed it in a very practical, down to earth way. And I guess, every author has to have that bit of realism. Like, not everybody was going to read about my topic. So let me figure out who is. And I'm assuming that's exactly what your book dives into. I mean, it quotes what you say, hundreds of marketing tactics. So it's amazing that you're able to challenge hundreds of other marketing tactics by what you're doing, is what I meant to say. So it's really cool that you list that out within your book. And this is what your 15-week system is about. So I'm wondering if you'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit and give us a very brief overview of what we could be expecting from your book so that when people go into it, they know what they're in for. What do you think?
yeah, so if you pick up a copy of Book Marketing Reinvented by Bryan Heathman, what that book is doing, it's going to outline a number of different things that you can do to market your book. It's got a whole list of things that are free,
Hmm.
like running a Goodreads giveaway campaign. Doesn't cost you anything to do that except for giving away copies of your book. All the way to hiring a publicist. And a publicist is going to be, $10,000 to $20,000 to hire somebody to do a 4-month PR campaign to get you on Good Morning America or the Today Show. Okay. If you're super lucky and you get struck by lightning, because it's really hard to get on those shows. So how do you choose? How do you choose from all these hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things? When I sat down to write Book Marketing Reinvented, I probably identified about 3,000 different things that you could do. And these were all things that I'd done throughout my career as a marketer, and all the things that I tried to identify as to what would be important for an author to do. But in reality, um, you can narrow it down to about 75 different things. But the 75 things, many of them, a lot of people have already done. But if you've
Hmm.
never written a book before, maybe you even haven't thought about these things. So, have you ever written an author bio, your biography? Now, it's different than your professional biography, right? So, I'm a social media manager for a ad agency in Manhattan. That would be different than I'm a writer of advice for authors. So you got to write your author bio. I usually write 3 different versions. Okay. Did it cost me anything to do that? Nope. It's free. So it doesn't go into that budget, which is great. Do I need an author photo? Um, Probably
Would
could.
you argue not?
Huh?
I think you should have an author photo. Is that
I
correct?
think
Yeah, of
I think
course.
you could. Yep. So do you grab your cell phone and take a selfie? Um, yeah, 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 you could do that. Or do you hire a photographer that, gets you into the motion of like a speaking pose if you're that type of author? Or do you wear your fedora and smoke a pipe because you're a mystery? What is it that you want to look like? What do you want to represent? One author I saw, he was carrying a broadsword. He was like a fantasy writer. And so his thing, he dressed up kind of like in a medieval outfit and he carried a broadsword for his author photo. I thought it was great. Um, so all these things are kind of part of it. And the list goes on. But if you do pick up a copy of Book Marketing Reinvented by Bryan Heathman, you'll be able to see the list and you'll be able to kind of go through. One thing I can tell you is that you don't have enough time to test everything. You don't have enough budget to test everything to see what works because marketing, largely for people who are getting into it, that don't do it for a living, it's trial and error. Well, this sounds good. Somebody wrote up this product brochure and it sounds really good, or the website looks beautiful. I think it looks good, but I've gone through hundreds of these things, hundreds, and I know exactly what works. And I can tell you all the really good looking stuff out there that doesn't work in selling books. So, um, that's all part of the puzzle.
Right. Well, it's good to know that if people do have questions and they just don't know what route to take and they don't want to spend the time and the money trying everything out, well, you're the expert. We can head over to you. And if people want to kind of give that a try, where's the best place they can find you, the best site to reach you at?
Yeah, sure. So my personal website is bryanheathman.com. I spell my name with a Y and not an I. So Bryan Heathman, it's
Mhm.
Heathman like a Heath bar. But the company that I run, where I'm the CEO and the publisher, is called madeforsuccess.com.
Mm.
So if you hit Made for Success and went to contact us, that would be a great way to reach out and ask some questions.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, perfect, guys. We're going to put the links to that in the description box of this podcast today so we can go over and click on it and learn a little bit more because there's so much to learn about this world and we don't want to do trial and error like you just said, Brian. So it's a perfect way for us to, get in the know about it. But before we start to wrap up today, you actually have another book about marketing out there in the world, the Book Marketing Reinvented. So I'm wondering if that's any different from writing your current book and if you faced any challenges in doing so. I guess I'm curious, how on earth do you market a book about marketing?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the first book that I wrote was called Conversion Marketing,
Mhm.
and it's all about how to
Oh,
convert a website visitor into a paying customer. That's all it's about. But really, conversion marketing is about promotions. What kind of promotions can I run on a website to generate a higher conversion of visitor to buyer? And before I was a publisher, I was a .com pioneer in the digital advertising space. So I started a company called iPromotions, and this is way back in the 90s. Um, and we actually got acquired by a big ad network out of Manhattan. And so once a week, I would fly from Seattle to New York to work on strategies for large advertisers to enhance their performance of their ad campaigns by running promotions. So the book that I wrote was conversion marketing, which basically teaches people the 30 different promotions that you can run and put on your website in order to get higher conversions. So your question is, how do you market that book?
Right.
So I got really clear on who the target audience was, and we identified a woman who was between 25 and 34 years old. She probably lived in a large metro area like Manhattan, and she probably worked in some kind of marketing profession, either for an ad agency or for a manufacturer. And so a lot of the strategies that we wrote were written. So there was a very um, specific orientation to the stories that I used for the book that would resonate with that target audience. And then it was, it was a challenge, but one of the things that worked well at that time, and I can't recommend it as high today, was doing public relations. So getting in the media. So the beauty of doing a media interview, let's say you're doing, let's just look at it today. Let's say you're doing a podcast show.
Right.
Um, and, not to get too personal, Danielle, but, how many people listen to these episodes once a week? Or how many people listen to an average episode? Is it 200? Is it 2000? Whatever the number is, right?
Right.
Yeah, or it could be 20. Now, if I were to go on and get on a radio station in Manhattan, that 4-minute interview would probably reach about 800,000 people.
Right.
Or, yeah, so when you're looking at how can I get the message out to a broad number of people quickly, doing media interviews is a very, very effective way to do that and get the word out.
Understood, right, and I guess it's a matter of kind of balancing and saying, "Okay, what's worth it? Which platform is best to get on the interview about too, based on that target reader?"
Mhm.
And then just making that most of the time, making sure you're getting your message across and leaving those listeners with the call to action to, like, not only pick up your book, but to make a step toward whatever mission it is that's being put forth in the book. So for you, I'm sure you always end a show with some sort of, okay, what can people do right after the show ends that can help them market their book? And for example, leading into my next question, what's a first step that somebody could take today to, make sure that they're advertising and putting their book forward in the best way possible?
Well, I'd love to take that question and break it down a little bit.
Let's do
So,
it.
um, strategy is everything. Okay. And once you've gotten your strategy, you do have to figure out what your budget is. So if you're looking at a $200 budget versus a $25,000 budget, that's going to dictate everything that you pick as part of your marketing campaign. So you've got to get really clear with yourself on how much you want to invest in the marketing of your book. Then, once you've got your budget, then you list out what marketing tactics that you want to do. If you're budgeting $2,000 to launch your book and you want to hire a publicist to get you on the Today Show, you're going to have to take that off the list because a publicist, is going to run $3,500 a month, or some people will spend $10,000 a month on their publicist, and they'll have to do that for 12 months in order to get the kind of exposure. So getting really clear on your budget, really clear on your marketing tactics. Then you figure out which vendors you want to use. And the trick again is going through and doing all the trial and error with lots of different vendors that sound good and look good. May not get you the result, but reaching out to an expert who's done this hundreds of times may help speed things up. And then for everybody that's written a book, you're going to have to allocate some time. You're going to have to
Mm.
allocate time to write your social media posts. You're going to have to allocate time to write articles for your media. You're going to have to allocate time for doing interviews like this. I had this one author who had a marketing budget that was a little north of $25,000. And
Okay.
he got invited to do a radio interview during the morning drive time in Manhattan. And
Wow.
this author lived in Las Vegas. So for him, the interview was at like 4:30 in the morning. And so the producer called him up and said, hey, we need you to, be on the air for this live interview at 4:30. We're really excited about your story and your biography and whatnot. And he goes, I'm not going to get up at 4:30 in the morning to do a media interview.
Ouch.
And he turned it down. And so anyway, so you got to get really clear and just understand that if you're not willing to get up at 4:30 in the morning for a radio show in Manhattan, then don't do public relations. Don't do PR. There's other things that would be more effective.
Right. Well, that just baffles me. It's your opportunity, your shining moment. Just because it's a little early in the morning, I mean, make that sacrifice. But everyone has their own thing, so I get it. But what a remarkable piece of advice. You got to really figure out, okay, what kind of an author am I? What kind of a person am I? What kind of a marketer am I? And how am I going to best make this work for my personal life? So that's a great piece
Yeah.
of advice onto.
Yeah, that's part of it. But really the key point there is getting your budget figured out,
Right.
because your budget's kind of at the top of the pyramid and everything else flows from there.
I like that pyramid visual. That's a great way to picture it too. A
Yeah.
good way to, keep it in mind as we move forward with our days and our writing processes. So I love it. Well, you heard it here, everybody. Make sure you keep that pyramid in mind. And if you are looking for even more details about marketing tips and tricks, well, Bryan Heathman has all of them ready to go. We're going to put the links in the description box of this podcast today. I'm wondering if you have any last bits of advice before we wrap up today. What do you think, Bryan?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've been talking about marketing and budgets and all this, but we didn't even get to touch on the juicy stuff, the AI. So,
Mm.
you and I are going to have another conversation, talk about book marketing and AI, because there's some really, really cool stuff out there that
I would
is
love that.
happening, and some big exponential things that you can do with some of these tools. Um, but I would love to hear from folks. Come to madeforsuccess.com, find the contact page, leave us a message. I would absolutely love to hear your questions, and see what your journey has been, both with writing and trying to figure out how you're going to get people aware of your book now that you've done all the hard work.
Perfect. Well, you heard it here, guys. Go ahead, click on over, and of course, check out number one bestseller, Book Marketing Reinvented on Amazon. Check out bryanheathman.com. And yeah, we'll definitely have to chat more about the AI strategies that you mentioned, because I understand you even have like an AI manuscript tool on your website. So really cool stuff for people to check out. Click on over, guys. It takes a minute to improve your strategies. That's all you have to do. Well, thank you for being an amazing guest. You definitely offered a ton of amazing tips for everybody, and it's been a pleasure to meet you.
It's been a real pleasure to be on your show. This is wonderful.
All right, everybody. Well, remember, the goal isn't just to write a book, but to make sure that it actually reaches the readers who need it most. So, like we learned today, make sure you have that target audience, make sure you have that budget in mind, that pyramid. Bryan's given us a really good idea of how to do that. So, until next time, keep writing, keep strategizing, and keep your mission front and center. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.